Here it is. There we go. All right. Thank you, Madeline. One of the things about these recordings is that we do this for posterity, and we've recorded the meetings even when we met in person. We had somebody show up with a video camera, and some of those are out there on online as well. But there's dozens and dozens of recordings for you, and you can watch this back later this evening, or well, probably tomorrow or the next day once we get it up on YouTube. So I'd like to ask you, what is on your mind? What are some of the things that have been troubling you? What are some of the things that are giving you joy? What are some of the things that make you laugh in these troubling times? We can look to the Middle East, and I don't see anything there that's making me laugh. But we can look to movies, and I can see some things in the movie realm that make me laugh. And we can look to novels. And for example, Stephen Wright. I don't know if you know who Stephen Wright is, but he has a new novel called Harold, which I just finished reading, and it made me smile throughout the novel. And it's told as if through a 7-year-old boy in his first grade, first time class, first time in school, and he's recounting his thought process as he goes through his day in school. The whole novel is one day from a 7-year-old viewpoint, as written by Stephen Wright. And if you're not familiar with Stephen Wright, he's this deadpan comedian that says things like, I bought batteries, but they weren't included. Or I would kill for a Nobel Peace Prize. And one of his most recent jokes is, I have a friend who bought an electric car, and then he bought an electric fence, and then he bought an electric blanket, and then he bought an electric chair, and we haven't heard from him since.
He's been around for 40 years and used to be on Johnny Carson.
Yes.
Yeah.
He was on Johnny Carson. Right?
Johnny Carson is.
And he's an Academy Award winner for a short film that he made. At any rate, he's one of the comics that can make me smile. So what is troubling you? You want to talk about religion, the Middle East, gun violence, peace? I'll tell you something. David Schwambert and I, David is still here somewhere, there he is. We write a little thing for the newsletter called Chit and Chat Talk Back. And we've been doing this for a year and a half or so, and we've covered all sorts of topics such as time, free will, and he'll write something, I'll write something, and then we'll compare notes, and then we might adjust it based on what each of us have written, and then we send it out, and it gets published in the newsletter. And Jamie, of course, edited it to make sure that we've got our verbs and adverbs correct, and our commas are in place. But this month, we're addressing the topic, why is peace so difficult? I'll throw that out there. Why is peace so difficult? It's something everybody wants, or they think they want.
Oh, whoops.
Is it really something everyone wants? I think a lot of people out there don't want that. I mean, the Christianity wants a mega war to destroy the world, right? I mean, it's part of the religion.
I would say something similar, that it is like a religion. Everyone wants peace, but under their terms. So for Christians and for Muslims, first the world has to be destroyed before God saves us and bring peace. And for others, it's just leave me alone. I don't care anymore.
It's really appropriate for our book club book choice for March. It's called The Back Channel. It's about diplomacy. He's a State Department. The person who's writing it is William Burns. He's a State Department He's been all over the world. It's very interesting about what he has to go through to get information and what he has to put up with from other politicians. It's really good. It's very, very appropriate for this what we're talking about.
Well, oh, that's great, and anybody can join the book discussion. Do you have to? It's better to have read the book to join the discussion,
Have to.
but it's not a requirement. You can just sit in and like proctor it, if you will, and audit the discussion and make comments as you see fit. But this is in March, and all of these dates are on the website as well, and the books that are upcoming are also on our website. Tell us the name again.
It's the back channel. It's like what the people have to go through to get information and keeping us out of wars. William Burns.
Uh-huh.
Is that
Okay.
But I think
Susan
one big
Oakford's
process was
house. You sign up.
Okay. So if you're interested, join that discussion in March. And I think the book club meets once a month, and they do one book a month. And there's also the movie group that meets once a month. And the movie group tends to meet, the book club meets in person a lot and sometimes Zoom. And the movie group is almost always Zoom.
It's on Zoom. It's on Zoom.
Because we
And
have
it's
to-
meeting
Very
tomorrow.
Very good movie this time.
Oh,
Excellent movie. It's called what's the name of it?
A Simple Plan.
A Simple Plan. It's just scary. You don't think movie's gonna be scary, but it's scary. It's a Dickens.
a simple plan. And
well, it's not a horror film per se, but it's a
But it's
psychological
scary.
horror.
Yes.
What someone may do for greed.
Okay.
So David, you said the movie group is meeting tomorrow
At 6:30
at
on
6
Zoom.
on Zoom.
Right.
Okay. And the Zoom information is on the First Coast Free Thought Society meetup page.
Right. Under
the book-
activities.
Under the act, we have two meetup pages, one for the First Coast Free Thought Society in general, and one for the book and movie discussion groups. So if you're in this group, you might want to check out the other group so you can also socialize with those. And you don't necessarily have to have seen the movie. You can proctor it and sit in and just check it out to see how the discussion goes. That's true, right, David?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I always like to say the book group is always on the first Sunday of the month, almost always. Generally the first Sunday of the month. The movie group, we decide when we're going to have the next meeting. At the end of the, like in the meeting tomorrow, we'll
Right.
decide when we want to have the next meeting. So it's not an irregular occurrence. It's always going to be on Tuesday, but
Yeah. It could be 2 weeks, could be 3 weeks, occasionally 4 weeks away, but we decide every time. But we'll put up the information about the next one within a few days of the meeting. So
Okay. And okay, so I have not seen A Simple Plan, so I don't even know what that's about. But Lance, you started to address why is peace so difficult, and you raised Christianity and you raised religion, and I'd like to just quote something from the Prince of Peace, if that's all right, if you'll bear with me a second. The Prince of Peace said, "Do you think I came to bring peace on earth? No, I tell you, but division. From now on, there will be 5 in one family divided against each other, 3 against 2, and 2 against 3. That's from Luke 12:51. And in Matthew 10:34, do not suppose that I've come to bring peace to earth. And then further, he who is not with me is against me. Which actually reminds me of President 45. President 45, who the Christian nationalists love and desperately need to agree with so they can position themselves to get a place in club afterlife. That's what they're jockeying for, and literally to hell with everybody else.
But wasn't that something Lenin said as well?
Wasn't that what?
Something that
Lenin.
Lenin also said. Those who don't support us are against us. Even if they don't, Even if they're not against us, by not supporting us, they are the enemy.
I think that's a feature of any orthodox or strongly held ideology, whether it's communism or whether it's Christianity or Islam or nationalism or whatever. And it's usually the ideologues in those groups who, it's all or nothing. And there's only one true way. And that is the problem. To me, we talk about religion being the problem. Religion can be the problem, but it's orthodoxy that is the problem.
Political absolutism.
Yeah, political absolutism or religious absolutism, any kind of moral absolutism, that becomes a problem. Actually, I was going to bring up something else, but I think I can bring it up in this context. And when we hear about conflicts way over on the other side of the world, if we hear about the Aceh uprising in Indonesia, okay, I have a feeling none of us here is really, familiar with that, but we might hear news reports about refugees or about explosions or about whatever, and it may, shake us up a little bit, and we may send money to the Red Cross or Doctors Without Borders or something because it tears at our heart. But we're not going to take strong sides and we're going to say, well, there must have been tension for a long time or whatever. But if it happens to our team, or if it happens to a team that we passionately support, then we don't want to listen to any argument except for our own argument. We don't want to listen to a discussion. We want everybody to realize that we are absolutely right and the other side is absolutely wrong. And the reason I'm thinking about this is not because I personally got connections to this whole thing. But for example, recently I've been talking, because I was a professor of political science for years, about the Middle East crisis, sometimes to students, sometimes to community groups. And one of the things that I have to be really, really, really careful about, even if I want to be able to say what has to be said about what's going on, is I think long and hard about how I'm going to phrase what I'm going to say, because let's say, for the sake of simplicity, there's side A and side B. And you can criticize both side A and side B in this situation and in other situations. But if you flip a coin and you say, oh, okay, I'm going to start with side B, and you say something about side B that's wrong, suddenly side B sees you as the enemy. They don't want to listen to what you're saying. They don't want to take account for it. They're already passionately committed to the fact that they're absolutely right. Only their side getting everything they want counts as justice. And, damn to hell anybody who might raise a question about that. And it's a flip of the coin. If I would have started with A, side A would have done the same thing. And it's very hard in that kind of situation, in a situation like the Middle East, especially the Arab-Israeli-Palestinian-Israeli conflict, to be able to talk about it rationally, even with somebody you disagree with. It's hard to get two people who disagree with each other to be sensible, to be rational, to exchange information and exchange opinions without it becoming a matter of, oh, you disagreed with me, you're automatically a liar. So there's, I'm talking about a reflex that people had, that the automatic default is, if it matters to me, goddamn anybody who says anything that disagrees with my analysis, even if I am trying to be even-handed. This is where B is wrong, this is where A is wrong.
David, why has that happened? It wasn't always like that. I remember when I was younger, people used to have good discussions, disagree, but have good discussions and then shake hands. Why can't we do that anymore in America?
I don't know. There, it depends on where you are and what the subject is. I have a feeling that if you tried to talk rationally about race relations in rural Georgia in 1960, you wouldn't be able to do it.
Right. It just,
Okay,
But I
because
remember
that was the
the
issue.
circles in Jacksonville where we sat around in circles and talked about race and then shook hands and said goodbye.
Okay, but if you were able to get together with people who said, yeah, let's get together and talk about race with people who seem to be on other sides of the issue, you're probably talking to the people who want to be reasonable about it. You're not just showing up at somebody's community center or showing up at somebody's church and saying, okay, I'm going to talk about a controversial subject. And they didn't come there because they wanted to talk about it. They came there because they wanted to have their feelings confirmed. I mean, I don't know if you've ever gone to debate on religion between a theist and an atheist. It is the biggest waste of time you could possibly have, because you've got the two people and each one brings their group there to cheer them on, and each group wants a victory. And so 35% of the people in the hall are the pro-theist and 35% are the atheist. And then there's 30% of the people came because I want to hear this. I want to hear what's out. But it's a contest. It's not a discussion. It's not a weighing of arguments. It's who's going to score more points. And I think that's what you usually get. People want to score points for their side rather than understand other sides.
Maybe don't listen to each other. We're so polarized.
Yeah.
Right.
I saw the Dalai Lama in person when I lived in Atlanta, and I posed a similar question and was interested in what his response would be. And he said, we have to deal with people or societies and where they are in their evolution. And that's why sometimes we have to have war and people die, because it's the only thing that's understood by those people. And I thought that pretty interesting.
and this
way
is
of looking at it.
the Dalai Lama.
Dalai Lama.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow, that is interesting.
It was an amazing discussion. It was all difficult questions to him, of course.
Yeah.
I've got a story about him, but Isaac had his hand up for a while, and so did Dennis.
Oh, Isaac, so does Dennis. Dennis has his hand up. Dennis, let's go to Dennis Lynch.
All right.
And then Isaac.
Very good. I had the opportunity to go to Ireland and Northern Ireland 4 years ago. And while I was in Belfast, I signed up and took one of the tours of the city. And it's a 3-hour tour, like on Gilligan's Island. And it started on the Catholic side of the wall. And one fellow who was our tour guide had been in prison. He had hurt people, had family members killed. And so we stopped at a little cemetery memorizing some of the people he knew. And he's walking along describing the events of the Troubles back, especially in 1969 or so. So he walks us a few blocks, about an hour and a half, and we come to this big gate in the wall. And at that point, they opened the gate, and our small group, about a dozen of us, went through the wall to the other side, where there was a fellow from the Protestant point of view. And he walked us back the other direction to where we started, told us exactly the same stories. And the only difference I could tell between the two guys was there's this wall between them. And the wall is maintained to reinforce the prejudices that are still there. It was a fascinating event. I'm glad I went, and I highly recommend it if you ever get a chance to go there to see the stuff that you guys are describing about how people are hard to change their minds and so on. That's all.
Okay. One of the things that I personally think about humans in general is one of the greatest things that we have, our greatest abilities, is the ability to change our mind. but we are so reluctant to do so, but we have that capability. Some of us just seem to get stuck in what we perceive to be our halcyon days, whatever those are, and usually it's somewhere in our youth. Often people get stuck in their high school days or their college days, and they can't get beyond that. And my view is that because it takes effort, and people just don't want to make the effort. It's easier to maintain a thought process than to try to explore it, examine it, and reject it. Because once you start rejecting your own, what you believe for the last 25 years or so, you have to also admit, well, maybe I was wrong. And that's not easy for a lot of people. Let's go to Isaac. Isaac, yeah.
Well, I would like to add to that sometimes the taking side, which is so absolute, brings situations of conflict within the standards themselves, because they actually approve things that they initially don't. I'll give you an example, something that I have a discussion for the past 2 months, and every time it's coming up, it's brought up, it's as heated as the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and it's book banning. So there are two types of book bannings. First, the term itself. So when right wings say book banning, they mean they mean total banning. So you're not allowed to profit from it. Usually when more progressive people talk about it, they mean if you don't pay for a book, then you're banning it, so it's immoral. So I'm talking about the second thing. So there is a saying, at least in progressive circles, any book worth banning is a book worth reading. And there is a book that I personally want to ban, even on a right-wing meaning of banning, so you will not even be allowed to profit from it. We have the First Amendment, so I hope the government won't do it, but I would not have any issue banning it. And I was participating in a Braver Angels, if someone of you know what it is, discussion with hundreds of people. They had like 120 something people in the discussion, so a lot of people there. And it was just too obvious that this book will come up. So someone, which was not me, because I said I will bring it up, I said, what about Mein Kampf? And then we're talking about elementary school level books and publicly funded schools. So I said, would you allow it? And someone said, yes. So I said, okay, I will read one paragraph, just one, from Mein Kampf. Yes, I chose a very, very disturbing paragraph, but the reaction of all those people who just a moment ago said, no book should be banned, and yes, it has historical value and it should be allowed in schools, suddenly say, you are not allowed to say that. You are the one who want to take my tax money to pay for a book which is on the public domain, which means it is accessible on Wikipedia, and say, yes, a 10-year-old should be allowed to read it at school. And then they say, well, maybe not 10-year-old. So you are banning it. You are saying that there should be some age restriction. There should be some banning, because there are some things that when you take an absolute stand, you realize that you support the things you just cannot accept. And the funniest thing about that is that every single person who supported banning Mein Kampf read it, and every single person who opposed it did not read it. And I mentioned another thing very interesting about Mein Kampf. Russia is the only non-democratic country in the world that bans Mein Kampf. Any other country where it's banned legally, you're not legally allowed to sell it, is democratic, or at least something that we will call a democratic country.
You can pick up a copy in Germany?
Now you can, because there's no longer the now it's in the public domain, and the German had debate, but their constitution does not allow the government to ban a book. So I can understand that, but you cannot just donate it to a library. You cannot just offer it to any public. If you want as a private person to buy it, you can, but public institutions are only allowed for research only copies, and they have to be approved by like things that we cannot imagine. Like think about it, you have a book that the Ministry of Education needs to approve, and Germany is not the only country. In Austria, I think it's banned completely. Poland, Guatemala, out of all places for some reason, and there are other European countries which, if you are caught selling Mein Kampf, you will be prosecuted for hate speech or something like, propaganda or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Are you suggesting that's a good idea or a bad idea?
I think that when we talk about banning books in the left wing meaning, not having a book like that in a public school, I don't care about public library, I don't care about private school, in a public school, that is something that I call it the 5 pages rule. If I can fill 5 pages of a book, give it to you, and you are unable to read out loud one paragraph and say, I still want this book to be in public schools, it shouldn't be in public schools. It might be only Mein Kampf, but I'm pretty sure I can find several books that we will not have the courage to stand in front of everyone, read a paragraph, and
The
say,
Bible.
yes, even this, what?
The Bible, you couldn't read 5 pages of the Bible and meet that rule.
Fine. I don't say that you should have the Bible. Okay, another reason. Why should the Bible, which is on the public domain, should be funded by the taxpayer
Yeah.
and have it in school? I agree. That's absolutely agreeable. That's exactly my point. Like, why should, I read the whole Bible. There are paragraphs that are very disturbing, and especially, all those conservatives who don't like the trans books and whatever. Did you read what some of the chapters in Isaiah said, or not in Isaiah, Ezekiel? They talk about, like, they're very, very graphic, very, very graphic. And the Song of Songs, they talk about, like,
Job doing child trafficking.
There are a lot of examples, but they wouldn't ban that. So why? If it's on the public domain and it's very, very problematic, maybe we shouldn't fund it and have it in public schools. The discussion was about libraries. A library is a library. It should have all books, even Mein Kampf, even the Bible. I don't see a reason to buy them. If it's a donation, fine, but at least I can understand why we should have it. I don't see any reason why a 12-year-old should read that thing. And just chapter 11 of Mein Kampf, volume 1, chapter 11. And I think that every single person who says after reading that, it's okay to have in schools, maybe we should have police look at their past. I'm just saying.
Well, you picked a good example.
Should read bad things and understand that it's a bad thing?
Yeah, they should read it. I'm not saying don't read it. I'm just saying that if you suggest that school children should have easier access to this material, then what are you trying to do? Like, why that? I read Mein Kampf when I was 23 in college, and I still had to, like, be able to endure myself to hold, like, what I'm reading. And I'm talking now I am not as sensitive as many college students today who very, very loudly and emotionally scream against not banning book and saying that this book is worth reading. First of all, I read the whole book. It's boring, but it's very poisonous. I don't know how to describe it. If anyone who read it knows what I'm talking about. Just read chapter 11. You don't even have to read the whole thing. Volume 1, chapter 11, after I think like 20, 30 paragraphs, you would say, okay, I read enough, I understand. No, it shouldn't be in public schools, only public schools.
One of the problems, Isaac, with that is that the public schools are funded in part by local taxes and governments and people, and also get funding from federal government if they meet certain criteria. And then we come into conflict with the First Amendment. So different localities might want to ban different things, and we see this all across America where different books are banned for different reasons in certain specific communities, and they want to, stand by community rule of law as opposed to what the First Amendment, freedom of press and speech has to say. And some of this has been played out in court. So,
but
Yeah,
Are these books are in the public domain?
Are these books in the public domain? Some of them are, yes. And I'm not prepared with a list of books that have been banned across the country right now. But
They've banned Anne Frank. They've banned Anne Frank in Florida, in your lovely state. The
right.
Diary of Anne Frank is offensive to Christians, apparently.
And in Florida, they're banning all sorts of things in terms of critical race theory. They're taking certain teachings of historical events out of textbooks, which is a form of censorship and banning. So what do we do, Isaac, when we have a division in the community that says, well, I think it should be in the public schools, and I think it shouldn't be in the public schools. Who gets to decide?
I gave the criteria. If you can fill 5 pages, give the person who wait 1 second. Give the person who supports having this book in school read, and they cannot read a single paragraph. And I read Anne Frank. I don't think Anne Frank has this. So right. I would support Anne Frank, and if you give me any paragraph, I would happily read it out loud to the public.
There's some sexual thing in Anne Frank.
That's okay. That's okay.
Isaac,
I've been 16 years old, can read it.
Isaac, your premise presumes people can read.
Well, that's what schools are for, hopefully.
All right, let's go to Fred. Fred, what have you got?
Okay, well, first of all, one thing about Mein Kampf, I've never fully read Mein Kampf. I read excerpts from it, and that's enough for me. But though I've been curious about reading the whole thing, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. But I have read the 1930s that Mein Kampf was described as the best-selling book that most people had never read. They got it for wedding gifts, or all sorts of gift things, and it was like, it was the thing to do in Nazi Germany, but most people couldn't get through it. But one person who did read it was Winston Churchill. That's why Winston Churchill, when Chamberlain was trying to make a deal with Hitler, sure said, this is not going to go anywhere. This is going to be a disaster because Hitler has already claimed what he wants to do. He's already said in Mein Kampf that he wants to take over Russia. And he's going to do any sort of chicanery to get his goal, even make a deal with Russia to divide Poland, to get himself closer to Russia, because he planned to break that deal pact all along. Because, no, Hitler's only invaded Russia because he was preempting what Stalin was going to do. Was his complete bullshit. Hitler he wanted that land for living space. Looked upon the Russian Slavic peoples as subhuman, and they had all this land that they didn't deserve. And actually, he wanted to do to Russia what the British had essentially done to North America.
Well, then it was important to read the book and find that out. If you couldn't read the book, you wouldn't have known that. So even though it's a nasty, terrible book, you find out a lot about the motivation of people that believe that.
You can read it online.
Again, like you should study the Bible.
It's on
if
Wikipedia.
You want to know what motivates people to strap bombs to their body and blow themselves up, read those books.
It's on Wikipedia.
And I'd also like to comment that sometimes the peace is not possible when two groups of people, even several groups of people, want the same thing and they're not willing to share it. Or sometimes someone wants something that says, I want your body to be my slave. No, I don't want to be your slave. Well, you're going to be my slave. And then later, when one part of the country says, we don't think slavery is a good thing. That's like, God damn it, yes, it is a good thing. It's good for the slaves, it's good for us, it's good for the country. So, some people say, well, the U.S. Civil War is all about states' rights. Well, it says, excuse my Anglo-Saxonism, but it's bullshit. If you read what they're saying,
states' rights to own people. That's what it was about.
But when it came to the states' rights of the northern states to say, we don't want to have to chase around and hunt your runaway slaves, said, oh, no. You made a deal, a federal law. You have to abide by the federal law. States' rights doesn't mean anything to us because you have to hunt down our runaway slaves. So they were opposed to states' rights.
To those states' rights, yeah.
Right. So and they only came with the idea of states' rights after the Civil War, when they realized there's no going to be longer going to be a winning proposition to keep saying we want to preserve slavery when slavery's already been done with. But and also when they later got into the public education that Reconstruction was evil. Reconstruction is a bad idea. It's all President Woodrow Wilson, before he became president, something I read in Atlantic. He's writing articles in Atlantic saying how horrible Reconstruction was. It was evil. And of course, there was one, I think, W. Du Bois was also writing articles saying, saying otherwise. But it goes on, and again with the Palestine, the West Bank, when two groups of people want the same thing, and they say we're not going to share it with someone else, and we're not going to divide it up with someone else. And even though there are parties that on both sides that say we think we should come to some sort of accommodation, but the hardliners say no, 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 and they're going to assassinate anyone that says otherwise. So I don't see how that's going to be resolved anytime soon. Probably not within our lifetimes, but I just it seems like an impossible situation. And same thing with Ukraine, because Putin seems dead set on recreating the old Russian Empire, which means taking a bunch of nations that are independent after the breakup of the Soviet Union. So it's kind of hard to reach agreements that some of that sort of mindset unless they totally lose. But again, that's going to be difficult because Ukraine is doing very well actually, but still, Russia is a massive nation with, they're, they have a lot of problems, and but as long as they have a lunatic in charge, I don't see how that's going to work out. And if we get a lunatic back in charge of this country, I'm not sure how that's going to play out. We'll see in the coming years. Hopefully we won't see with that person in charge, but we can't entirely rule it out.
Well, thank you, Fred, for your comments. Feel free to speak up anytime. Lance, you got something you want to add to that, or you want to take us in a different direction?
Well, I wanted to say something unusually optimistic for myself in response to your question about peace and to what Dennis told us about Northern Ireland. Getting over hate is an amazing thing for me. And if you go to Cambodia, you see that the Cambodian people are getting past the horror that they experienced. And you go to Vietnam. The first time I went to Vietnam, or actually the only time I've gone to Vietnam, everybody my age, I was afraid to look in their eyes because what we did to them. But they are not angry. They are moving on. They're beyond it. They have museums. You go into a museum and they have M16 guns, and with labeled, the evil Americans brought these here, and yet they're welcoming Americans into their country. They're beyond it. And you look at Black people in America. If I had been born Black, I'd be burning every fucking thing down I saw. Still, right? I'd still have that anger. I have anger for them. And yet look at the best Christians, the best peacemakers are African American people who have been able somehow to get past the hate. And so I think there are some positive examples of people who don't just perpetuate those things, who have learned how to get behind it or past it. And go to Vietnam and you'll see that they're very proud of their culture without being hateful and angry about it. And think of how we would have reacted if somebody attacked our country. And would we ever have gotten beyond that? No, I don't think so. So I think there are positive examples of peacemakers or people who have found a way to get beyond the horrors that they suffered. And it's funny because I don't think Americans have really got beyond Vietnam. I think we still have mixed emotions about Vietnam, and yet the Vietnamese are beyond it. You know, they're not saying it was a good thing. They're not happy about it, but they've moved on. You know, it's amazing, I think. It's not normal for me to see the positives. So take that with a grain of salt.
That's funny. Well, thanks, Lance. I wonder if our assistance after the Vietnamese troubles and the horrible war that we had there, the conflict that we called it, and that their ability to move on, as you say, was in large part because of our assistance after it all ended.
I don't think in large part, but certainly that affected it. But you know, they're not a beggar culture. You know, they're not out there with their hands out. You know, they have built their own society. They're hardworking people. You know, they were never the image that we had of them. You know, if you look at the history, Ho Chi Minh had been fighting for freedom for 50 years. You know, he was in France when they did the settlement for World War I, the Versailles Conference, trying to get independence for Vietnam. So this was never this communist thing that we turned it into. This was a national liberation movement. They had been fighting the Chinese for 1,000 years for their independence. You know, Ho Chi Minh was George Washington for Vietnam. And, you know, he went to the communists because the communists accepted him. You know, he went to France first. France wouldn't free the country. So, I mean, this was a liberation movement. Americans were lied to. And America and Russia turned Vietnam into something it wasn't. You know, it was that's why we lost, because the South Vietnamese people were Vietnamese and they wanted to be Vietnamese. And the world tried to turn it into a different kind of a conflict, you know, communism versus whatever we are. But it wasn't. It was a national liberation movement from the beginning. And Ho Chi Minh is an amazing person. We should be studying Ho Chi Minh in schools because he literally spent his entire life from college to his death freeing Vietnam. Yeah, I mean, think if George Washington had spent 60 years liberating America from England. Ho Chi Minh did that. That's what he did, you know, and it's amazing, I think.
Well, I guess your point in a large part is one of the reasons the Vietnamese were so resilient and defiant and successful, if you can call anything involving that conflict a success, but they weren't conquered, was that they were fighting for their own home.
Yes, for 1,000 years. I mean, you know, it's unbelievable when you think about it. You know,
it's unbelievable to me that anybody would want their home.
Yeah, that much. Yeah.
Let's hear what David has to say. David, you're up.
Okay. Well, I was going to go back to the question that Isaac brought up and some of the other comments that people made, because I don't entirely disagree with Isaac, but I think the problem is that before this was highly politicized, with the whole question, like in Florida, the whole question of banning books, the books that are being banned now by the Mothers Against Liberty and other groups are to say that slavery wasn't such a bad thing and racism, like Nikki Haley said, America was never a racist country.
Yeah.
And, you know, people, there's nothing normal about being gay, etc. So it's become highly politicized. And then the word banning comes up. Banning has always been a problem. But in a healthy community with healthy educators in a healthy school, something goes on which, because of the atmosphere we're in now, we're applying the word banning to, which isn't the same as banning. It isn't the same as what, the ACLU, of which I've always been a member, has, taken up in the courts, because a good school librarian and a good school administrator will have books in the school library that are appropriate for school age students. So I would say it's appropriate for school age students, especially adolescents, to know something about homosexuality because of what they're going to go to and because of the world that surrounds them. That doesn't mean that sexually explicit material is appropriate to have in a school library. And if you don't, as a school librarian, you say, well, I'm not ordering that book, I think it's a little bit too explicit, but I'll have this book, which is fine. But it's, no matter what, there's a gray area. But I wouldn't call that exercise of discretion on the part of a mentally healthy administrator and a mentally healthy librarian to be banning. It's not saying, oh, you can't read it and this is terrible and it's giving the wrong point of view. It's, as an educator, I realize this is what a 6th grader can handle, and this is what a 9th grader can handle, and this is what a 12th grader can handle, and I'm buying the books there. So there should be books about Germany during World War II and Nazism. There should be books about horrible things in slavery and experience of people. Anne Frank's book should be in there. Hello God, This is Margaret, or whatever the name of that book is, should be in there, which is, actually, I just read it recently. It's a very delightful book. But the decision should be made on an educational, discretionary basis, and not on this ideological orthodoxy based basis. And in that case, it's not really right to say banned book. I would not personally think that it's appropriate for a 6th grader or 7th grader to be leafing through Mein Kampf. I also don't think it's appropriate for a 6th grader or 7th grader to be leafing through Playboy magazine, if that still exists. I don't know if it exists or not. But so there are discretionary decisions that are made on educational and psychological bases. That means I'm not going to have that book in my library, but I'll have this book in my library. I wouldn't refer to that as banning. But then when somebody comes in and says, oh, you can't have anything that says something bad about Christianity. You can't say anything that criticizes America in any way. You can't have anything that criticizes or that promotes the gay lifestyle, and promotes counts as admitting that it exists. Then it becomes banning. And it's a very subtle nuance that I'm talking about here, but I think that's what happens. Once the politicization comes in, then we lose sight of that other side of it, choosing books that are educationally, psychologically appropriate. Interestingly enough, I was going to say something about states' rights, because it, in a way, it has that same problem, because we generally talk about states' rights in terms of the Civil War and after the Civil War, in terms of Jim Crow and things like that, because the racists and segregationists were using that to defend their right to their own traditions, which include treating 2/3 of the population like garbage. But it wasn't a states' rights issue, because progressives were really big on states' rights in the 90s and early 2000s, when some states said, hey, I don't care what the national government says, we're going to legalize marijuana. And other states says, I don't care what the national government says, we're going to legalize gay marriage. Well, that was states' rights, but it was progressive states' rights. So suddenly states' rights wasn't what the reactionaries were doing. States' rights was what the progressives are doing, which means the issue was never states' rights in the first place. But because of the vocabulary, because of the way we discuss these things, these become trigger words. These, I hate that term, but these become trigger words. These become dog whistling words. And we lose sight of what's really going on and what rationally the right approach might be. So I wanted to say that. So I'm not exactly agreeing with Isaac, but I'm not exactly disagreeing with Isaac on what he said. So,
All right.
I'd
Isaac,
like to comment.
your hand is up. You want to follow up with David?
Myself or Fred?
Isaac?
Yeah, I wanted actually, while David, I agree most of what he says, and I wanted to clarify something regarding what the criteria that I put, which I think was overlooked because I think it was Lance who mentioned the Bible. So if we take my criteria, you can fill 5 or even 7 pages of very disturbing paragraphs from the Bible, but will the people who oppose banning it will have an issue reading one paragraph out of those 7 pages? Now let's take Mein Kampf. Will the people who oppose banning it will be able to read one paragraph? And that's all I'm asking, one paragraph. If you can stand in front of people, all nationalities, all religion, everything, and read one paragraph out of the 7, 5, even 10 pages, because this is how bad Mein Kampf is. Even 10 pages. If you read one paragraph in public, unashamed, and say, I still think this book should be in school, not banned, because let's say my wife's daughter, okay? My wife is a granddaughter of an SS officer, but she is very, very not white, and her daughters are even less white than her. I don't know if it makes it very clear she's not white. So let's say one of those daughters say she wants to read about the country where her grandparents came from, and she heard about this book. So yeah, if she wants to read it at home, guided by her parents, explaining what those things means, why it shouldn't be, fine. But why should we have access for children who never heard of it, who live in I don't know, rural Alabama, suddenly read this book, and it doesn't matter if they're white or something else, because then they read it, it's like, why is it in this school? Think about it. You go to a school in Mississippi, someone decides that this book should not be banned, and you have, I don't know, 60% Black people, and they read it and they say, what is this school saying by allowing that thing to be in school? Now, if in some communities, they would say, I read it, I know it's horrible, and I think because it's horrible, students, I don't know, age 15 and up should be able to access it, even though it's available online for free. That's fine. But if you cannot find one single parent standing in front of the board, reading something, and I'm just hinting, because anything that I would quote from there will be, even for this audience, for our audience, would be horrible to hear. Just one paragraph. That's all I'm asking. One paragraph.
Well, Isaac, maybe you're making a suggestion to Huldy that the First Coast Freethought Society actually read Mein Kampf and have a discussion out loud and see if they agree. And maybe you can sit in on that and help guide the discussion after everyone's actually read Mein Kampf.
I mean, I would not suggest it, but if people think that, I mean, if you think Donald Trump is bad, you haven't seen anything yet. Like, if you think anything in our current politics is bad, it's like it's comparing a bullet to a nuclear bomb. That's the sheer differences. Like, I mean, if you want to take it, it's really on you. I read it 3 times. Well, my master's is in German studies, so I did what is in college and twice since, and I couldn't read all of it after the first time because it was just way too much for me. But if there would be something like that, I would make sure that even when I'm deployed in Japan, if it's in 3 in the morning, I will find a way to participate, because I think that when people read it, they would understand that thing. Again, I just want to clarify, public library, yes. Private school, even if it's elementary school, yes. Publicly funded school, not university, should not have it available unless one of the people who oppose the banning, I provide 10 pages. Look how generous, 10 pages. Just read one paragraph out loud in front of people of all origins without saying, okay, yeah. And say after that, that's all I'm asking.
All right.
After reading that, I still think this book should be in our school. That's all I'm saying. If someone is able to do that, okay, have it in their school. Let's see how long it will last.
Do you think Mein Kampf will ever be turned into a movie?
I think it has. I mean, you mean modern movie?
Yeah, I mean like a movie like Spielberg might make.
No way. No, not the way Hollywood is
not
right
that
now.
book. It's not a storybook.
You know what? Based on what's going on in the past 3 months, I don't know anymore. If
Yeah,
you see people who are woke going in the streets of LA with, Nazi salutes screaming Heil Hitler at random Jews, maybe it's possible now. I don't know.
all right. Well, Fred, your hand is up. You want to add to this, or you're going to take us in another direction?
No, I would like to add that from what I understand of Mein Kampf, it's not a book that can be transformed into a movie at all, because it's one long rant by Adolf Hitler about everything he doesn't like, everything he despises, and what he would like to do to make a better world for a greater Germany.
It could
So
be
it's-
done. It could be done.
Well, the Passion of the Christ was a whole movie.
Yeah, it could be done through dream sequences.
Yeah.
Hitler with an upset stomach, and suddenly he's going to change. He's going to destroy the entire world. What else you got, Fred? Anything else?
I was going to say the big thing with states' rights is back in the mid-century of the 1900s with the post-Civil War era after Reconstruction, was states' rights to deprive people of their federal constitutional rights. So we want the states' rights to take their rights away. Now with the progressives, it's to expand rights. They're saying we don't think you should have taken these rights away for people to smoke marijuana or people to do this or do that when they're not hurting anyone else, quote unquote, but or sort of say, but to me that's a big difference. If someone's saying, I want the right that support by my state to deprive these people their right to vote. Now that's completely unjustified. But they found all sorts of ways to justify it for decades. Even they even say, we want the right to lynch these people that we don't like. And there are people who are trying to get an anti-lynching law for decades, probably for most of a century. Because the people that said, we were saying lynching is a good thing. So that's
All right. We're spending a lot of time talking about things that we don't like, and I'm hoping that before we conclude this evening, we might have an opportunity to share some of what we believe are solutions to whatever it is we've discussed in terms. I know Isaac is talking about the range and where books can be and shouldn't be and all of that, but some of the other things in terms of the hatred and why peace is so difficult. What are some of the solutions? Think about some of that, and let's go to David. What you got, David? David, you're muted.
Unmute.
Some people prefer me that way. What I was just going to respond to Isaac again. I'm not necessarily disagreeing with him. However, if you go on YouTube, you can definitely find this. But Senator John Kennedy, no relation to the president and his family, from Louisiana, who was one of the largest, let's just say, wrong end of the horse in the Senate, and there's a lot of competition for that title. You can see him reading excerpts from books that he considers to be totally disgusting, obnoxious, obscene, etc., in Congress to put it into the record. So he is reading it with a precise goal to get it kicked out of the thing. But of course, one of the things that he's trying to do is to say, because I would happen to say the book he's reading from, no, I wouldn't have that in a school, but he wants to say all books that talk about homosexuality are like this, which is clearly not true. But at any rate, to answer what you just asked for, Ken, what I was originally thinking of, and that's, when I first brought up the subject of my stressing about how I was going to present any presentation that I had on the Middle East, was this. There are some political issues that the Free Thought Society clearly will take a stand on, and it will be civil rights, separation of church and state, free speech, things like that. We clearly have a place in that discussion. There are other political issues where it's not so clear that everybody who would be a free thinker would be on exactly the same side of the issue. And, it tends to be the case, I think, that most of the people in our group are progressive to one degree or another, New Deal Democrats or whatever, but it doesn't have to be. We used to have several people who were libertarians in our group. We had one person who was a moderately conservative Republican in our group who, there's no contradiction being an atheist or a non-theist and being politically conservative especially on economic issues, etc. So there's some issues that it would be hard to have the group take an official stand on, but that doesn't mean that the group shouldn't want to discuss them. And if we could come up with a way to occasionally have a discussion or a panel or something that could show a couple of different sides of the issue of an issue that's of concern to everybody, where it would be planned in such a way that it wouldn't be a debate and it wouldn't be, a scream fest or something like that. If we can think of a way to do that, that might be a positive contribution that the Free Thought Society could make.
Have you thought about that way?
Well, it's possible that, there could be, you find two people who have disparate ideas about, a certain situation, certain political situation, political issue, who are both in our group or associated with our group, but they would have to plan ahead of time how they would do it. They would have to be able to talk to each other ahead of time about how they would discuss it. But the point would be to make it a discussion rather than a debate.
Yeah, you're a big proponent of the word discussion.
Yes.
I've known you long enough to know you're not even a fan of the word conversation.
I know. I hate that word. I hate that word. It's so overused. And people use it when they mean discussion. They want to say, oh, let's talk about the most horrible divisive issue we can think of as a conversation, which means sitting around with gin and tonics and laughing and having peanuts and telling jokes. It's not a goddamn conversation. It's a discussion. And it's not, a bunch of people gently joking about the issue. It's you want to get serious. You want to get to the nut of the issue. So it's not a conversation. So please don't use that word again. This is my censorship. This is my banning. I ban that word.
Well, all right. But if we're in a coffee shop,
yes,
and it's just the two of us, is that a conversation or a discussion?
Well, since once I give my opinion, you almost always have no choice but to agree with me. It's a conversation. Yeah.
I see. All right. Well, the point is made in terms of conversation being a little bit more happy in terms, like, for example, if we were to ask you, why is there such turmoil in the Middle East? And
Mhm.
let you go for the next 3 hours, and that would not be a conversation.
No, that would be a monologue.
That would be a monologue, right? A diatribe.
Yes, yeah, that's even better. It would be a diatribe.
But not without form or shape. It would be with, you are an informed individual relative to the Middle East because you're a
Right.
former political science professor, and this is one of your bailiwicks. This is your wheelhouse. But it comes down to religious hatred in a lot of, not just exclusively, but a lot of
That's
it.
an element. It's an element, but
Right.
nationalism is an element.
All right.
And everybody who has no business sticking their fingers in it, but stick their fingers in anyway, is an element. There's a lot of different elements.
It's all about ignorance.
Pardon?
It's all about ignorance.
Well, ignorance is a big,
by religion, justified by nationalism, justified by hate.
Yeah,
which is why calling
mishmash.
ourselves the Free Thought Society is a good thing, because we're open to the facts. We want to know about facts.
Right.
Well,
but we want to find a way to demonstrate that and demonstrate how that works. How to
right, but the solution is to get rid of ignorance, to find out the truth.
Right. But it's also right. But it's also, I make the assumption, and I think it's a fair assumption. I'm hoping it's a fair assumption that the people who are in this group are pretty well educated and sophisticated in general terms, but not everybody in this group is an expert on the conflict in Cyprus, is an expert on the conflict in the Middle East, is an expert on market economics, is so you can't know everything. And so you come to this group. That's one of the reasons we have the speaker, to get more informed, etc. But sometimes you get more informed when you hear an informed discussion between two people who disagree with each other but respect each other and are not going to hurl insults at each other when they disagree, and they're both marshaling facts and interpreting those facts for you. And if we could find a way from time to time to do that, like, we have 10 speakers a year, 11 speakers a year, no, 10, because we don't meet in August.
Right.
And we have the December thing. But if one out of those 10 was more of a panel or more of a two people with disparate viewpoints discussing and planning out the discussion, that might be helpful. That might be instructive.
That would be fun to do. That would be fun. We're all ignorant on different subjects. That seems to be a truth.
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And one of the crying calls to change the world is the word education. But when you drill down on the people who say they just need to be better educated, what they're actually saying, if you hang in there long enough with them, is that they want to educate whoever to think like they do. That's the education they want. We don't do a good job at teaching people how to think. We're better at teaching people what to think.
Right, but that's what one of the advantages, I think, that being able to do something like this, if we could pull it off, is it provides demonstration, how to think rather than yell and scream.
Right.
That's right. Which is part of our reason for existence, part of our mission, I would say.
Well, I agree. And if you got that brings up another point that I wanted to make earlier that I didn't make in sort of my introductory remarks, is that if anybody here has an idea for a program for the First Coast Free Thought Society, either it be in person or via Zoom, please let us know. Email us. You can email me. Our contact information is on the website, or you can just go to publicity@fcfs.org, and I'll get it. But it's all on our website.
Or email me.
Or email Lance. Yeah, Lance is one of our program. Yeah, Lance. Yeah, exactly. Uh, Let us know. Get in touch with us, and because we'll do our best to make it happen. And one of the things we're looking forward to next month is Holly Near, as we talked about a little earlier. She's this singer, songwriter, activist, peace activist who's been around. She's 74 years old now, and been around a long time doing her thing. But I don't want to go back to all of that. That's on our website as well. Let's go back to Isaac. Isaac, your hand is up. Are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here. So actually, I wanted to add some based on what your request to actually give solutions. So, and my solution is regarding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Israeli-Arab, Jewish-Arab, whatever they want to frame it. This is something that I've been working with two friends for the past 3 months, more or less right after the conflict, the current conflict started. And the interesting thing is that I was in another meeting, another Zoom meeting a few days ago, and someone said something similar. So I think that at least in Western view, that's a solution. And the idea is, first of all, one state. I think that in current situations, yeah, but this one state would not be called Palestine, Israel. It would be called Canaan. And then try to, as much as we can, make it very neutral. Well, we have to first understand the argument from both sides. None of those populations is going anywhere. Okay, so the Palestinians are not going anywhere, even if they are originally from Jordan or Egypt or Lebanon. It doesn't matter. Same for the Jews. If they're from Iraq or Iran or Morocco or Poland, they're not going anywhere. Had they wanted to leave, they would. And those who did not want to stay already left. So we have like a whole thing. We already have a proposed flag that will incorporate both nations or both ethnicities, if they want to call them that, the current flags that they have, and some symbol of the land. We have suggestion to the form of government and reconciliation, because one of the things that people say is like, well, how will the hatred end? So I think it was Lance who mentioned Ireland. So they were able to get over it there. And I will actually take a quote of a Palestinian that I saw a few months ago. And he said, there is a German embassy in Tel Aviv, and there is an Israeli embassy in Berlin. If the Jews and the Germans were able to reconstruct their relations after what happened, we surely can, because any way we flip it, the conflict is in scales by far smaller than anything that we saw in Europe, in the Balkans, or in Ireland, or in other, in Vietnam, and they were still able to move on eventually. Ireland still not as a one state, but that's mainly due to economic reasons, I would say. So that when the UK left the European Union, Ireland had to adjust because of economics, not because they want to be part of the UK. So we have some ideas as far as military and natural resources, education, cultural heritage, right of return, which is a very big issue for everyone. And I don't know if it would work, but it's an idea towards a solution. So that's what I have to say.
Well, I appreciate your effort at the solutions, because that's the challenge. We're good at pointing out, the problems. The solutions is where the trouble is.
I'm even sending in the chat like the vision of the flag that should be very neutral on the one hand and incorporate the elements of everyone currently. So without taking away anything, not proposing a Western point of view, but rather local, but unified instead of divisive. So a symbol which is very unique to the region, yet and culturally appealing to Christian Jews and Muslims or Arabs, and on the other hand takes all the colors of both flags and mixing them, and it's also in the same order, because in the Israeli flag, the blue is on the top, in the Palestinian, the green is in the bottom, and white in both of them is in the middle.
Now, I also want to point out that we have an advocacy page on our website. Our advocacy page covers legislation in the state of Florida and across the country, and mostly the state of Florida, but also national federal legislation that affects the First Coast Free Thought Society in some manner or other. And if you are interested in reading that, you can go, and it's all chronicalized by date and also by category. But if you're also interested in making a contribution to the page, you may submit something that you think we should post on our advocacy page, and we will. David is one of the people in charge of that page. He'll get it and he'll discuss it with you, and if necessary, if not, it gets posted. It's as simple as that. And you can just do it through our contact page on the website. I want to bring up something that might be a little bit troubling, and this is something that David and I both wrote about in our Chit and Chat Talk Back column, and that's artificial intelligence as it applies. We didn't write about this part, but we wrote about it in general, but as it applies currently to our election process. I don't know if you are aware of this, but there are AI voices in robocalls going out to people in New Hampshire right now in the voice of Joe Biden, telling people don't vote. And people are getting this, and I don't know how people are reacting to it, but it's how problematic is this for you, and how does it reflect back on looking at the 2020 election and the 2012 election, the 2016 election, in terms of the Russian interference, if you will, and more in terms of social media, but now it's become even more sophisticated in that the AI can replicate your face and your voice and make it as if you are the one making these claims. Is this troubling for you, Fred?
Yeah, and it should be illegal. The person whose image is being used without their consent and voice is being used without their consent to spread,
Well, suppose it is illegal.
that they don't support, that they don't actually, never said.
Suppose
that should be completely illegal, and they should be held. Who's doing it should be held accountable. And
but you're presuming these are Americans doing this. Suppose it's somebody. Remember those letters you used to get from Nigeria that said, if you just send me, $1 million, my whole country will be saved. Suppose it's somebody else around the world. It's not just Americans that might be doing this. You can't hold everybody, the world, accountable.
It should be banned one way or the other. They get it off or somehow. And
so now we're in favor.
It shouldn't be a legal free-for-all where everyone can say anything they want. They can say that, this person is a pedophile and he's admitting it. Here he is saying admitting it. And the person who's so-called supposedly admitting it never said anything of the sort and never did anything of the sort. But they're saying he did it. He said so. You have it. And if there's no legal recourse whatsoever,
how do I hold up my hand?
Very problematic.
How do I hold up my hand?
Well, Jewel, go ahead. You want to say something?
Oh, well, just very interesting to see where Fox News goes with that new technology.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me where it's going to go because it happens so quickly in terms of the creation of these things. The voice and the imaging it happens almost instantly. That's how fast it works.
And I read about that stuff years ago.
Right.
About the possibility of doing that. So the technology has been there for a while now.
Right.
And it's only getting better and faster and in the hands of you have
I think anytime it's used, it needs to be identified. It needs to be identified. In a political ad where it says, my name is Joe Schmo and I agree, at the end of the thing, it should say, this is an AI generated piece. Maybe even identify who did it. but nothing should be broadcast unless it's identified as authentic or AI.
Mhm.
One other thing criminals have been doing is
I
taking
think
images of famous actresses.
the burden.
But Lance, you're talking about being broadcast. I'm saying these are robocalls. These are telephone.
Anytime it's even that should have to be identified. You shouldn't be able to use something that's not the person. Your image is you.
Well,
At the end, you should say, I'm Ken Hurley and I agree. But if you're not, it should say which the person may or may not agree with, right? Whether that's a social media site or, in this case, the people using the phone lines or whatever.
well,
But we're not going to end AI, but we should be able to identify that this is AI. This is not the real thing. And then you judge yourself whether you think it's cute or not, or interesting or not.
do you think it's?
But you're not going to ban AI, but you should have to identify.
But it does have sway, even if they are ahead of the curve in terms of getting before we ban it. If that's what if that's the direction we are heading, which is going to be a big challenge because it's global. But right now it's working. They're reaching people and people are listening to it. Now, I don't know how effective it is. I know that the working part is they're getting in touch with people. But then our phones have these things called likely spam or potential spam, and we answer or we don't answer depending on whether we know the number or not. But if AI can do that on a robocall, they can also do it in a Facebook ad or a TikTok ad or anything else, any other social media, and become very believable.
Yeah.
So that's and what
most
I'm hearing is
people are so stupid that
what I'm hearing, Lance, is
take the original source. They won't look on that.
You're in favor of banning it, or at least identifying it.
I think it won't make much difference if it's identified or not. It would to you, maybe to me, but people don't care. I mean, truth is not truth anymore, and it's not even important.
The truth is highly overrated. Because it's so subjective. It's my truth. It's my belief. That. So therefore, I'm right. But then if everybody can say that, the truth is extraordinarily diluted.
Well, when there's no evidence for it,
perhaps.
Right.
So it's the truth because I say so, regardless of the evidence.
Mm-hmm.
But I think another trouble thing with AI is that they can make films now showing famous people of all walks of life doing things they never did. They can do a porno with a famous actress who never engaged in a porno at all, or they can do a porno featuring a female politician or so forth, or show a male politician engaged in sexual contact with a child. And though it's completely fake, both the child and the politician are entirely AI. They can make it so that people say, "Oh, wow, I didn't know he did that. Well, I'm never going to vote for him, or I think he should be going to jail," and so forth. And those becomes a thing with the law when this so-called evidence of a crime that never happened, but the only evidence for it.
The Soviets have been doing that for 100 years, right?
Yeah. So at any rate, I think this is going to be another issue that we're going to have to deal with as a society globally, and I don't have a solution for that unless we have the AI playoffs. We have the different companies and their AI organizations and their chat GTTs and all of that get together and fight it out, and whoever be the best AI win. We could do that. It's sort of like what they did on Jeopardy with Ken Jennings and Watson, IBM. Let's bring them all in and see, and let's make it entertaining if we're going to have to put up with all this. I think that would be a good idea. So at any rate, so what does it look like in terms of a Trump presidency? You're looking forward to that? It's going to be
You're gonna do that.
we're round 2. Here he comes. You like Nikki Haley taking him out? Is that a good idea? What do you think?
Anybody taking him out would be a good idea.
This is
He
when I
cannot
wish,
take him out because
I wonder if he could be somebody, that person could be hired.
this is when I wish I believed in UFOs.
the Republicans claim that Nikki Haley is the secret agent of Democrats to bring down the Republican Party because she agrees with too many independent stands which are not Christian enough. And this is part of what we talked about, political absolutism. You cannot be a Republican anymore if you're not Christian, and if you're not a certain type of Christian, and if you not believe certain things that those certain type of Christians believe. So if you're a conservative, you cannot be a Republican today.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you think Joe Biden should step aside and let somebody else take over in terms
Yes.
of the primaries?
Yes, but with everyone that the Democrats have to offer, Trump will probably win either way.
Yes. Suppose they offered Pete Buttigieg. No?
Yes, better.
He's
He'd
young.
be a better person,
Yeah.
but I don't think he could win the election.
You
Right.
think Trump would beat him?
Yeah.
No.
Can you imagine what the Christians would do to a gay candidate? Come on. Don't be a Jewish president either.
David, who could win?
Well,
Pardon me?
it's too late in the game now, I think, for somebody to step in and really, charge and churn up. And unfortunately, politicians are politicians, even when they have the right ideas. But, if I was thinking about, a year ago, who should have said something, who should have stepped in, I'm not crazy about Newsom, but he's certainly got more charisma than either Trump or Biden. And I personally like Whitmore, the governor of Michigan. But I think she's waiting until 2028 if we have elections then.
Yeah, she's young enough and and wise enough, and she'll
Yeah.
be around for a while in Michigan.
And
Newsom Whitmore would be a great ticket.
Who in Whitmore?
Newsom Whitmore.
Why not the Whitmore Newsom ticket?
I have a feeling Newsom would come off as more dynamic. He would rub a lot of people the wrong way, but he would come off as more dynamic than Whitmore. I think Whitmore would be the brains.
Newsom would be the John Kennedy. Would be
Yeah.
a John Kennedy-like candidate.
Right, but I think
and
Whitmore
of course,
has.
I think we haven't seen the last of DeSantis because he's still fairly young and he's likely going to be in the trying again in 2028.
Yeah, but he's got all the charisma of
Unless
my
you
left
Florida people
slipper.
do what he's
Yeah.
done.
I mean, they keep touting about how, he won so handily in the last governor's election, but he was running against somebody who had, the personality of a dish rag. So, it wasn't a big surprise because Christ he had been a Republican, then he was a Democrat, then he was in the middle, and then he was this, and then he was that. And he's not, he's not a powerful candidate. So, I mean, that's part of the problem with the Democratic Party in Florida is there are really no good, strong people in the forefront. But
There was a time when Gavin Newsom was married to Kimberly Guilfoyle. Kimberly Guilfoyle, if you're unfamiliar with her, is now the current girlfriend of Donald Trump Jr.
And a horrible person.
She was also a major contributor to Fox News for close to a decade on whatever that whatever their 5 o'clock show was. Not that that matters, but I'm just saying that they were married at one point. That's all. I find that interesting.
well,
Like
people,
a woman who is married to Mick Jagger and then married Rupert Murdoch.
Yeah.
I can't remember her name now.
Right.
Bianca. But people, I mean, people move all over the board. But one of the things that it says is that there's also an elite, and people move among the elite when they move from one end to the other. Like Ariana Huffington used to be a Republican, used to be conservative. Now she's pretty progressive, and she moved, but she's also part of the elite. And Guilford and Newsom are part of the elite. So there is an elite, and you move among the elite. Newsom, if he gets married again, he's not going to marry Jane Doe from Wilmington, Delaware, who's a school teacher. That's not going to happen.
Right.
He'll probably marry, I don't know, Taylor Swift.
Yeah. That's true. There is elite, and I'm not in it. It's like George Carlin's routine about America. It's a big club. You ever hear that routine? America. Yeah. It's a big club, and you ain't in it. It's a club of ownership, and you are owned.
Speaking about George Carlin and AI, did you watch the AI presentation of George Carlin?
No.
You Google it. It's amazing. They took all of George Carlin's material and fed it into the computer and upgraded it. In other words, if he was alive today, how would he present the material? And
updated it?
There was a lot of criticism, but I thought it was amazing, and I'm a big George Carlin fan. It's almost like AI can help you to live beyond your years, because they basically took his personality and how he thought about different issues and updated it as though he was alive. It gave me a whole different
maybe they'll clone him. They'll clone him, and then they can merge the two technologies. And it's walking about on the stage somewhere.
It's almost like bringing him back. And his daughter criticized it. She didn't like it, but I thought it was kind of amazing. And it really gave me a new perspective on AI. AI was always like, I didn't understand what it could be good for. But this is a really interesting way to, you could put how Socrates felt about things in a computer and have Socrates commenting on what's going on right now. I thought it was interesting.
I'm listening to the Republic right now, and he would be really big on banning books. So we might not want to go. We might not want to go there with Socrates.
Well, Dennis Lynch, your hand is up.
I was just remembering a story I read some 30 or 40 years ago it was in an Asimov science fiction magazine. And this guy's job was to go back and fix old movies. So he was working on the Ronald Reagan release of Casablanca. And we put Bogart with Reagan's face. And now we're seeing AI trying to catch up with what they were talking about that long ago. That's all.
That's sacrilege. That idea, the world's greatest movie.
Is that the greatest movie of all time?
Yes.
I think it is. Yeah.
Are you going to say it's even greater than Pee Wee Herman's Big Adventure? or what about The Godfather?
Nah,
Casablanca is perfect in every way. The music, the cinematography, the acting, the character, every single thing about it is perfect.
Ingrid
Don't forget,
Bergman,
Warner Brothers' original idea was that Reagan was supposed to be the
right?
star of the film.
Yeah.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yes, yes.
Wow, I'm glad they got Humphrey Bogart. Reagan was always so stiff to me whenever I saw him in Bonzo, whatever that movie was.
Bedtime for Bonzo.
Bedtime for Bonzo. He's just stiff, tall, lanky kind of, not a good actor to me. But it played well for politics. It gave him the skills for politics. It really did help him there, I think.
Probably.
Yeah, I think he had tools that he could fake his way through stuff if he needed to.
DeSantis should have
And Reagan used to
studied
be a
him a little bit.
Yeah,
Interesting
but then he
that
might win an
the-
election. Oh.
the two biggest Republican presidents have been a B actor and a reality TV star. Interesting.
Yeah. Oh, right. Well, I'm not a fan of, obviously, you probably know this, of Trump in any way. And if you followed anything that I've ever written, you know that. But matter of fact, I just don't understand. I can understand Trump to a certain extent. What I struggle with are the people who still think he's a good guy.
Yeah.
That's the part that I can't wrap my head around.
I
Well,
think
you
they
can't-
think
You can't wrap
nobody's
your head
perfect.
around it. You can't wrap your head around it unless you realize how powerful the Christian hate is in that country. It's all about Christian hate. He gave them those 3 idiots on the Supreme Court and they got rid of abortion. They're going to get rid of gay rights. They're going to get rid of everything they hate. They're going to put women back in the kitchen barefoot and pregnant. That's what they want. So it's all about that hate. It's so funny to me when I watch discussions on the internet. They dance around the elephant in the room. They talk about white guilt or all these other issues, these ancillary issues, and it's all about Christian hate. That's what it's about. 70 million Christians voted their hate. And also their wet dreaming about an apocalypse. They love that. And, why do they support Putin? Because he's a white guy who hates the same people they hate. It's all about Christianity in that country.
Well, they don't even care. They talk about overthrowing the Constitution and being a strong man. That's another thing. They love a strong man who's going to do things that they want them to do.
Who's going to hurt the liberals and hurt the gays and hurt the blacks and kick out the Mexicans.
And what's funny is that any Democrat does what Trump does, they'd be ready to tar and feather him and execute him. But Trump does it. Hey, that's okay. He's our guy.
Yeah, here's a guy that's convicted of rape. I mean, it's not like people just said he was a rapist. A jury has convicted him of rape. Can you imagine? I mean, what's the guy in New York who was masturbating on the internet? He lost his career, that Democrat,
Anthony Weiner.
Yeah.
Weiner.
What a perfect name.
Yeah.
Al Franken, a really
Yeah.
good guy who, as a comedian 20 years ago, touched a woman inappropriately. He's lost his career. Gary Hart had some woman sit on his lap and he's finished, right? This guy is a convicted rapist and they're voting for him. It's unbelievable.
That's my point, Lance. I can't wrap my head around this.
Wrap your head around it.
Nobody's perfect.
Million Christians
Nobody's perfect.
prefer their hate over anything else.
Bless his heart.
I just don't get how any woman could vote for Trump.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if they can stick their Bronze Age nonsense on liberals, they will. And he's going to help them do that. He's going to help them punish women and punish gay people and black people and all the people they hate.
It makes me wish that the rapture is a reality.
Yeah.
And these Christian nationalists will all be joyfully leave the planet, you know. And, well, let's leave it here. Unless anybody has some closing remarks, we're pretty much to our end of time. I want to thank everybody for being here and sharing your thoughts and making your comments. And I invite you to go to our website, and I invite you to sign up on our meetup page so you can get informed about all of our upcoming activities. We do post them. Next month is February 19th. Monday at 6:30, Zoom room opens at 6:15. Holly Neer, as we talked about earlier. More information about her on our website and at our meetup pages. And if you're not actually a paid member, if you're interested, you know, $20 here will help us support the expenses that we do have. We do have some expenses. We're a 501c3 educational charitable organization, but we have compliances that we have fees, we have promotion expenses, you know, so $20 or $50 or whatever you can do goes a long way to helping us and you would then be part of the reason that we can continue our public outreach. And I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody here tonight. Any last comments before we say good night? Anybody want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that everybody knows that we have speakers through July. And but if you have ideas after that, please let me know. I like your idea about a debate of some sort. And I will try to
Oh, great. Well, Lance is the guy to make that happen. He's once he latches onto something, David, he might be able to pull this off. And you two might want to talk to each other about who you think might be good in terms of the debate and an appropriate discussion.
Yeah. And David, if you would like one side of that debate and have me try to find somebody to take the other side, I'd be interested in that as well. If there's an issue, you know, maybe the Arab-Israeli issue or some other thing that you would like to take one side of, and then I can find somebody for the other side.
I'm willing to do the other side.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, I'm all for it. I think it'd be good. So on this note, I want to thank everybody again, and I'm going to leave you with this one last question. Who do you think would win in a fight? Lord Sauron from Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter? All right. Now, once you start thinking about that, it becomes complicated, just like religion. That's why sometimes we just don't want to think about some of this stuff. We just leave it alone. So at any rate, I appreciate it. Lord Sauron or Harry Potter, who would win? I don't know. At any rate, good night all.
Good night.